Speak, Lord, I'm listening. Are you? Are you listening when God speaks to you? And if you are, is that all you're doing? It's just listening? Because that's really not enough. It's kind of like when you tell your kids to take out the rubbish, and they go, okay, and then they don't do it. You got to follow through with what you say or what you're hearing, right? Otherwise, it's an awesome recipe for a guilty conscience if you're just listening and not doing. We want to consider just one more Bible story this morning, and it's found in the book of Luke, chapter 5. And I'm going to read it for you from the clear word here. It starts off, it says, "One day it so happened that Jesus was teaching by the Lake of Galilee, and the crowds got so big and the people so close that he almost pushed them into the lake. Then he noticed 2 empty fishing boats floating nearby and the men rinsing out their nets as they stood in the shallow waters near the boats. He climbed into Simon Peter's boat and asked his disciples to push him a little way offshore. There he sat down in the fishing boat and continued to teach the people. After he'd finished speaking, he turned to Simon Peter and said, 'Push out a little further in where the water is deeper. Then have your men throw out their nets.' And Peter answered, 'Master, we fished all night and didn't catch anything, and this is not a good time for fishing now. But if you say so, we'll do it.' He heard it, even though he didn't agree, he still did it, right? So then they threw out their nets and caught so many hundreds of fish that when they tried to pull them in, their nets began to break. They shouted to their partners in the nearby boat to come and help them, and soon their boats were so loaded with fish that they nearly sank. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell on his knees in front of Jesus and said, 'Oh, Lord, I'm a sinful man. Why do you even come near to me?' He said this because he and the others were so amazed at this huge catch. They knew it was a miracle. James and John, who were in the other boat, were amazed also. And Jesus said to them, 'Don't act so surprised at this huge catch of fish. From now on, I want you to fish for men.' Then when they got back to shore, they left their boats, their nets, and their huge catch of fish with the hired help and followed Jesus." That simple? They just left everything and followed Jesus? Would that be your reaction? To be honest, I don't think that would have been my reaction. I would have had to go, well, let me think about this, God. And I would have had to think about all the pros and cons of doing it. And of course, we have to pray about any big decision before we make it. And then, we would have to think about it for a while. And is this really what I want to do with my life? Because after all, God's asking me, or Jesus is asking me, to leave my family, leave my home, follow him, run around, have no idea where I'm going to sleep from one night to the next. There are some things about it that didn't sound all that appealing. I would want to be guided by I would be tempted to be guided by my husband and my friends. What would they think about me if I was to do this? I'd be tempted to be guided by my own experiences. Well, I'm not an evangelist. I don't have that skill set. Why is he asking me to go? I would be tempted to be guided by my own circumstances. If I do this, am I going to be able to support my family? Am I going to be able to take care of my kids? I would also have been tempted to be guided by my fears. This is something totally different to what I've done before. What if I can't do it? What if I don't like it? What if I'm a failure? That wasn't the reaction of these young men, was it? They left their nets, they left their catch. They didn't even spend the time to clean their catch and think about it while they were doing it. I'll give you an answer when I'm done dealing with all these fish. No, they left it to the hired hands and they followed Jesus. That's the reaction that Jesus wants from us. When he asks us or when he impresses on us to do something, he wants to see that commitment that we have to him, that we have committed our life to him, that we have said, yes, God, you are my Lord and Savior. If you want me to do that, then that's what I'll do. It actually wasn't the first time that Jesus had called these men. You know, back then, it was not too unusual for men to be disciples or followers of a great teachers, but they would keep their day job. When Andrew was called, he was a disciple already of John the Baptist, but he was still fishing. Remember, Paul was a tent maker while he was still preaching. That was quite common. But this time was different. That ends, that last verse that we read there, when Jesus actually calls them, he says, there it is, but from now on, I want you to fish for men. From now on, things are going to be different. From now on, this is going to be your full-time job. Jesus calls us, when he speaks to us, is usually something he wants us to do. He has something specific in mind for us. Maybe it's some character trait that he's showing up going, hey, you need to work on this. Or maybe it's someone he wants us to call because he knows that person is discouraged and they need a phone call. Maybe it's, someplace you need to go to meet someone. God, it speaks to us for so many different reasons. And he asks that we will show that dedication and follow whatever it is that he's leading you to do, to go deeper with him, just as he was asking these disciples. Let's take this relationship a step further. Let's go deeper. Let's make serving Jesus our number one priority of our life. But it's not always easy, is it? It's easy to say it, it's easy, but when it comes right down to it, it's not easy to do. Because to be honest, sometimes God tells us to do things that we don't want to do, right? We just don't want to do them. Many of you know that before I moved here, I lived in La Crosse for 14 years. And before that, I was living in Woodbury on the other side of the cities. We were so happy living in Woodbury. We loved it over there. We had great friends. When we bought the house we were in, we loved the house, and we said, this is our forever house. We're staying in this place. Our kids were in the Adventist school. They were doing really well. Everything was great. And then one day, my husband came home from work and said, my boss has asked me if I will go to La Crosse and manage the Merrill Lynch office there. And I could tell from the moment that he asked me that he really wanted to do this, because he had said numerous times, I knew that he really would rather live in a small town, not in the big city. So I knew he wanted to go, but I did not want to go. I was happy where I was. Why would I uproot everything and move? I didn't want to go. And so, you think about the pros and cons and you pray about it, but you're always kind of hearing what you want to hear, right? If you've already made up your mind that this is what I want to do, then you find all kind of evidence, all kinds of things to make you follow that path, that that's what you want to do. But I just kept having this nagging thing in the back of my mind, and so I went, okay, God, I'm going to throw out the fleece like Gideon did. See, Jim and I had been talking about, if we move, we would want them to, hire a moving company for us and pack up all our stuff, take it down there. We would want them to pay the closing costs of the house we're in. We'd want them to pay the closing costs of the house we were buying. We had this great big long list. And honestly, I knew it was very unreasonable to think we were going to get everything on that list. I was so sure it wouldn't happen. But what I said was, okay, God, you want me to move down there? Have Merrill say yes to everything on that list. Because I knew it wouldn't happen. But you know what? They said yes. They said yes. So I was like, I guess I'm going to lacrosse. But I was not happy. I didn't want to go. Even though I was so clear that God was saying, yes, you're going to lacrosse, I still didn't want to. And you know what? 2 weeks after, Jim's boss called him and said, you know that moving package that we'd agreed to? Yeah. Well, he said, I talked to my boss about that. He said, because I've only been in this job for like 2 or 3 months or something. So when I talked to my boss said, absolutely not. He said, the highest executives in our company do not get that moving package. You are not giving it to some little peon kind of thing. So we did not get everything on our list. But I was okay with that because the deal I made with God was they would say yes, and they said yes. It was so clear to me, if I even doubted it before, it was so clear to me that God wanted us to go to lacrosse. That's where he wanted us to go. So, again, I accepted it. Not happy, but I accepted. I was going. I went down there before we moved, and I went down and I looked at a couple of the Adventist churches down there, and I had appointments with 3 or 4 of the schools down there to kind of check it all out and work out what we were doing, where we wanted to be. And the end of the day came, and I pulled up at the last appointment I had, the last school I was going to visit, and I pulled up in front of the school, and I sat in the car, and I just cried. I just went, God, there is no good church in this town. There is no good school in this town. Why do you want me to move here? I was so upset with just the whole situation. Well, after I had my little meltdown, then I pulled myself together and I went into that school. You know, the other schools that I'd been in, the principal had given me, 5-10 minutes at the most, and it was really begrudgingly. It's like, oh, what are you wasting my time for coming in here? Kind of attitude. This principal, he spent over an hour with me, and that school ended up being such a major blessing to my children and to my whole family. You know, even though I didn't want to go, I couldn't see the plan, but God knew what the plan was. He had it all laid out. He had a reason to take us down there. So when you can't see the plan for yourself, trust the planner, because he knows what it is. He knows he's got it all worked out for us. I very, very nearly said no to God. I so badly wanted to say, we're not doing this. But when I look back on those days, it was a great place to raise my children. I learned so many things. I grew myself so much in those years. My husband found a business partner that he has had now for 20 plus years. There are so many good things that came out of those years in lacrosse. Would never have happened if I had have said, no, I'm not going. The Pathfinders gave us examples of a number of people in the Bible who said yes to God. But the Bible also gives us examples of people that said no to God. People like Balaam, who was told not to curse the Israelites. People like Jonah, who tried to run away instead of going to Nineveh. People like the children of Israel. We could go on a long list of things that they said no and didn't listen to God about. Nothing good comes from saying no when God speaks to you. Nothing good at all. Jeremiah 7, verse 13 and 14 says, he was speaking to Judah about their lies, their adultery, murder, worship of Baal, all the things they were into at the time. And he said, I spoke to you again and again, but you refused to listen. I called you, but you didn't answer. Therefore, I must thrust you from my presence, just as I did your brothers in Israel. Whoa. That's a sad story, isn't it? To be pushed away because we refuse to listen. That doesn't mean that there was no hope for them. God still spoke to those individual people, drawing them to him, trying to get their attention, to get them to listen. But they refused to follow God. This morning, I want you to think about it. Are you listening when God speaks to you? Are you responding? Are you following through with the things that he says to you? Because that's what the whole purpose of is, isn't it? Of our relationship with God is to listen to him and to follow his message for us. Thank you.